Hey folks, welcome back. Chris in Central Pennsylvania. I have some disheartening news that's no doubt going to irritate a number of South African refugee aspirants and probably some American officials. News has reached me this afternoon that a South African refugee and her teenage daughter who were relocated to the United States have up and flown back to South Africa without informing anybody. Confirmation apparently occurring that this person actually left the country and went back to South Africa despite being in the refugee program. This sort of behavior, if true, puts South African Refugee Program in jeopardy for people making fraudulent claims. Now, whether her claim was legitimate to come here or not isn't the question, but the fact that she willingly, without notifying anyone, flew back to South Africa raises all kinds of questions about the validity of her persecution claim. That's the sort of thing that the leftists will latch onto that is problematic for the refugee program with South Africans. Let me run through a few little highlights of this. I recently traveled to Georgia, and while I was in Georgia, I went to Decatur, also went to Monroe, and then I went to South Carolina as well. I met this refugee and I met her teenage daughter in Georgia. This refugee asked me to come down there to talk to people. I did. I went down there, was happy to do it. And then apparently, not long after I've left Georgia, this person decided to go back to South Africa. Nothing to do with me, obviously, but decided to do that. Now, recently, someone contacted me from the United Kingdom and spent 45 minutes of my life in an evening when I was sick and not feeling well, telling me about how they've been helping this person in so many ways. And then what can we do? And I said, well, you can't help people that don't want to be helped. And apparently my analysis was correct. So this woman, let me explain a few of the circumstances about how frustrating this is. This woman, the United States government took the time, the resources, the money to interview her, to pay for medicals, to fly her and her daughter over here at our expense, well, International Organization Migration, which will reimbursed. We brought them over here. They owe that money back to the IOM now. So that $2,000 or $4,000, whatever it is, they owe that debt. That's a legitimate debt. They're going to have to pay that back. In addition to that debt, the U.S. government spent thousands of dollars bringing these people to America and then gave $2,450 in direct grant money to help them resettle in the country. This doesn't even take into account the refugee agency that took them on, who was providing services to them. Or does it take into account the fact or the reality that this person signed a lease with an apartment complex which has gone out of its way to accommodate South African refugees, giving them perks and benefits not normally available to those who rent in that complex. And you'll learn more about that in an upcoming interview with Darren Parker about what a lease means. But these people were given an advantage that others didn't get. And they've broken their lease, which is a legal binding agreement. They have abandoned their refugee status in America and gone back to South Africa without notifying anybody. This is problematic and presents all sorts of problems for those who are genuine refugees from racial persecution in South Africa. As I've said over and over again since President Trump announced this program on the 7th of February last year, this is not an immigration program. If you want to immigrate to a country, do that on your own dime, not on our taxpayer dollars, and don't waste our time and resources. Now, there's more to this backstory, which I'm not going to share because it will identify the person. At the moment, I'm not willing to do that. They're not here to defend themselves. But what I've told you is true. And beyond this, the families that are in the complex where this refugee was located at all need motor vehicles. Someone who's a South African volunteer paid $2,500 to buy a used car for this individual. Now, this refugee got that car, which could have gone to someone else more deserving or more genuine who truly was a refugee. Then this person drove the automobile without insurance. Who drives a car without insurance? I recently showed some folks, I showed Lily, in fact, who came up here from Texas on another mission. I showed her the insurance sticker in the back of my SUV from when I was in Uganda over a decade ago. I just left it in the window. You can see that even in Uganda, a broken country like Uganda, I had to have motor vehicle insurance to operate my motor vehicle. In Liberia, I had to have insurance. Who drives a vehicle without insurance? Irresponsible beyond comprehension. And then she crashed the vehicle, destroying it. To my knowledge, this individual has not repaid the $2,500 for that car that generous volunteer had provided, and now has absconded back to South Africa after getting grant money, after being flown over here. What about the flight money? And here's the more important question. How, in fact, did this refugee, if she went back to South Africa, how did she pay for that? if she has no money. Because I can tell you the following. I'm aware of, and I was aware of previously, 2 jobs that this refugee was offered. 2 jobs. And in both cases, she was hired. And she failed to show up for work at either of the jobs. Now, there are circumstances here that I'm not describing, but that is not germane. People have gone out of their way to help someone come to this country who claimed racial persecution. And then a generous person living in America fronted $2,500 to buy a car for this person who irresponsibly drove the car without insurance and totaled it. And then the person is offered 2 jobs and been hired twice and failed to show up for either job. Some people you can't help. This is going to infuriate people who've been waiting since February last year with PRM email, or May with the statement of interest, or even those who've applied recently who are suffering from unjust racial persecution. It's also going to be fodder for the New York Times and the Washington Post to talk about how people are treating this program willy-nilly. Now, having said that, there are refugees from other countries who just up and abscond and go back to their home country. But there isn't media coverage in the Congo for a refugee who returns there. There isn't media coverage for a refugee from Somalia who goes back to Kenya. There isn't refugee coverage for someone who goes back to Kyrgyzstan because nobody cares. But this program has been turned into a political hot potato. So when you do this, you jeopardize everyone else. It's incredibly selfish, regardless of the circumstance, to just pick up and go. Now, I have credible sources have told me that she's flown back to South Africa. I have no confirmation other than that. But the sources I have, I trust, and have known one of them for many, many years. So what do you say about this sort of thing? I mean, honestly, all the effort, all the time, the energy others put in just to fly back and don't even tell people you're leaving, broke the lease. This could jeopardize any refugees who are looking for housing in that Decatur region of Georgia now. They may not be able to move into this housing complex because of what this person has done. They're not the first person to do this. A couple other people have actually just abandoned their leases, which is illegal. They could be pursued legally, but it's not worth the effort because they have no money. So this is the third instance of this happening, but the first time that someone from this complex went back to South Africa. This is beyond irresponsible. This is unacceptable. Frankly, unacceptable. I would like to know more about the screening process and what it is we're doing. Are we bringing people fleeing from persecution, or are we bringing people who are looking for a free ride and don't get it and go home? Now, fortunately, over 7,000 refugees have come over here. This marks only the 6th person I'm aware of that I can confirm that's gone back to South Africa. The 6th. But you watch, the New York Times will latch onto this. They won't follow up the interview questions for me, but they will latch onto this story, and we'll see where it goes from there. Whatever the case is, shame, shame, shame. For shame, for shame, for shame. People genuinely suffering and a desperate need to get out are sitting in a queue while people coming over here abusing the kindness of strangers, taking money from people, and irresponsibly driving a vehicle without insurance. Who does that? Not showing up to work twice, not once, but twice to job offers, and not showing up. And then abandoning a legal agreement that you signed. Well, you've poisoned the well for others. I hope that it was worth it. What say you, South Africa? Mzansi? Cheers.